Hey folks, this is Matt Smith calling to let you know I'm an HVAC technician out of South Bend, Indiana, and the reason I'm doing this is because I'm studying for my 608 exam to technician certification exam, and I'm looking forward to getting this online, maybe getting some people talking online, get some help what I need to do to be prepared for it, and then also just help everybody out and spread the love. So, with that being said, this is part four. This is part four to the series. This should be the end of the core unit. Hopefully, it doesn't run too long. As always, I will put questions in the description of this video section, and then when you're done reviewing this, you can go back there. If you answer the questions, then we should be good to go as far as passing the core part of the examination on the 608 certification. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start doing that right now. So right where I left off, there's the three R's for the three major R's, and the three major R's is recovery, recycle, and reclaim. That's the R's of refrigeration. So recovery is to remove the refrigeration from in any condition from a system and store it in an external container without necessarily testing or processing it in any way. Recovery is done in order to have an adequate supply and service for the production bands, prevent venting to the atmosphere, and to prevent stratospheric ozone depletion. Recycle is to clean the refrigeration from immediate reuse by separating the oil from the refrigerant and moving moisture and acidity from the refrigerant by use of products like a filter-drier. To reclaim, it is the process of refrigerant to the level of new product specifications as determined by the chemical analysis. Reclaimed refrigerant must meet the standards set forth in ARI 700 before it can be resold. The 3R review questions. How is recovery different from recycling? Obviously, recycling is to clean the refrigerant for immediate reuse, and then recovery is simply pulling the refrigerant out of the system and putting it into a separate container. How is recycling different from reclaiming? Recycling is different from reclaiming because recycling is to clean, of course, again, and to cycle through and filter it out. But then reclaiming really is the process is to process refrigerant to the level of the new product specifications as determined by the chemical analysis. Reclaimed refrigerant must meet the standards set forth in ARI 700 before it can be resold. But that's not saying that you can't put it back into a system. For the owner, if it's a landlord that owns two properties, you could recycle or you could reclaim it from one container, one system, and put it into another system. That would be totally legal. Again, don't take my word for this. There's other things that are written down. Just I'm telling you that's true as far as 2020 goes. That's absolutely true right now. So we're going to talk right now about recovery techniques. Recovery techniques. All refrigerant recovery and or recycling equipment now manufactured must be certified and labeled by an EPA approved equipment testing organization to meet EPA standards. There are two basic types of recovery devices. System dependent devices capture refrigerant with the assistance of the compressor and or pressure of the refrigerant in the appliance from which refrigerant is being recovered. Self-contained devices have independent means to draw the refrigerant out of the appliance. The EPA requires a service aperture or process stub on all appliances that use a class 1 or class 2 refrigerant in order to make it easier to recover the refrigerant. A Schrader valve, which looks a lot like a bicycle tire air valve, are common on both refrigerant systems and on recovery equipment. When using Schrader valves, it is critical to A. Check the valve core for bends and breakages, 2 or B. Replace damaged Schrader valves to prevent leakage, and C. Cap the Schrader ports to prevent accidental depression of the valve. Due to the increased charges for recovering refrigerant, consumers have complained about paying for the process. In order to handle these complaints, let the consumer know that recovery is the law. Recovery is necessary to protect human health and the environment. All professional service personnel are duty bound to follow the law and protect the environment. When recovering refrigerants, only put one type of refrigerant in a tank and do not mix different refrigerant types into one tank. Mixed refrigerants in the same tank may be impossible to reclaim. When servicing a system that already has a mix of two or more refrigerants, the mixed refrigerants must be recovered into separate tanks. The longer it takes to recover the refrigerant, the higher the chance of emissions of the refrigerant into the atmosphere. The following factors affect the time it takes to recover the refrigerant. Number 1, size of the system and the equipment. The bigger the system, the longer the recovery. The bigger the capacity of the recovery equipment, the faster the recovery. Size of suction hose. The longer the suction hose and the smaller in diameter it is, the higher the pressure drops in the system and the longer it will take to recover the refrigerants. Temperatures. The colder the ambient temperature, the longer the recovery process. The system is warmer than the recovery cylinder. The recovery will go faster due to a high pressure in the refrigerant system and the low pressure in the recovery cylinder. Oxidation. Some refrigerants have a potential of oxidizing copper tubing. If you smell a strong odor during the recovery process, it is likely that the compressor has burned out. When recovering refrigerants from a system that has a burned out compressor, watch for signs of contamination in the oil. After completing the transfer of liquid refrigerants between recovery units and the refrigeration system, avoid trapping liquid refrigerant between the service valves. Nitrogen may be used to flush debris out of the system after recovering refrigerants. The nitrogen may legally be vented into the atmosphere, if allowed by the compressor and the manufacturer. A suction line filter-drier should be installed to trap any debris that may cause damage in the new compressor. If you smell a strong odor during recovery, what is most likely the problem and what is additional problems should you look for? Dehydration, evacuation. The purpose of dehydrating a refrigeration system is to remove water and water vapors. The presence of moisture is in an operating refrigeration system can create highly corrosive toxic acids. The recommended method for dehydration is evacuation. Before evacuating a system, it is important to recover all refrigerant and attain the mandated vacuum level. The factors that affect the speed and efficiency of the evacuation are: 1. The size of the equipment being evacuated. The larger the equipment, the longer it will take to evacuate. 2. Ambient temperatures. The warmer the temperature, the faster it will evacuate. You heat the refrigeration system to decrease the evacuation time. 3. Amount of moisture in the system. The more moisture in the system, the longer it will take to evacuate. 4. The size, capacity of the vacuum pump and the suction lines. The bigger the capacity of the vacuum pump and the shorter the time. The piping connected to the pump should be a short length as possible and as wide in diameter as possible. Vacuum lines / hoses should be equal to or larger than the pump intake itself. The intake connections. For the most accurate readings during evacuation of the vacuum gauge should be located as far as possible from the vacuum pump. Measuring the vacuum of a system that should be done with the system isolated and the vacuum pump turned off. It is the system will not hold a vacuum. Then it has a leak. Dehydration is considered to complete when the vacuum gauge shows that the system has reached and held the required finishing vacuum. It is not possible to over-evacuate a system. It is not possible to over-evacuate a system. All right, and then these are just some general safety tips. Hang in there, this is almost done. Whenever handling and filing refrigeration cylinders, always make certain that you are wearing proper PPE, including safety glasses, butyl-lined protective gloves, and safety shoes. Be certain to read and follow all of the equipment and product manufacturer safety precautions. When working with solvents, chemicals, or refrigerants, read and understand the manufacturer's SDS safety data sheets before handling. Refrigerants can be deadly if inhaled or allowed to be heated. Refrigerants have heavier than air and will displace oxygen in the room, leading to asphyxiation, lack of oxygen, and excess carbon dioxide in the blood, causing the respiratory interference, unconsciousness, and eventually death. Oxygen deprivation is the leading cause of refrigerant accidents and can lead to death. Inhaling refrigerant vapors in the air can also lead to heart irregularities, and a direct exposure to the skin can cause frostbite. Never try to siphon refrigerants by mouth. Always work with refrigerants in a well-ventilated area to help avoid oxygen deprivation. In the event of large leak, immediately vacate and ventilate the area to use self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. Never expose refrigerants to open flames. Live steam, glowing hot metal surfaces, or excessive heat. Some refrigerants, when exposed to flames or steam, change to a toxic material such as hydrochlorofluoric, and halogen acids, as well as carbolin halides, carbolin fluorides, and phosphorus gases. Because this, never weld, cut, or braze a refrigeration line on a charged system. Always evacuate all refrigerants from the system before using any open flame repair. Excessive heat applies to refrigeration caused in the process and can lead to explosions. When checking for leaks in the system, always use dry nitrogen and pressurize the system, and never use oxygen or compressed air. Oxygen or compressed air, when mixed with the refrigerants, can cause an explosion. When using dry nitrogen, it is in service or installation, always charge through a pressure regulator. Make sure that the nitrogen cylinder has a regulator on it, and insert a relief valve downstream line for the pressure regulator. All refrigeration systems must have safety relief valve. The valve must not be installed in series and must be replaced if the corrosion buildup is found within the body. To determine the safe pressure for leak testing a piece of equipment, read the design of the test pressure information. Refrigerant safety is addressed in ASHRAE Standard 15 Safety Code for Mechanical Refrigeration. ASHRAE Standard 15. This standard specifies an oxygen sensor and alarm for A1 refrigeration and a refrigerant detector for all other refrigerants. It also requires a refrigerant sensor that will sound an alarm and automatically start a ventilation system in an occupied equipment room where refrigerant, regardless of the refrigerant type, may leak will concentrate. The alarm will sound before the TLV-TWA, which is the threshold limit valve, time-weighted average. It exceeded oxygen deprivation levels. The ASHRAE Standard 15 also specifies ventilation requirements, but may not prevent hazardous accumulation. And I'll stop there. Thank you, folks. Feel free to ask any questions in the thing, and look for the questions in the description. Thanks, kids. Bye.